What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actresses sits down for what should be a routine interview and ends up in the most explosive confrontation ever witnessed on daytime television? Today, we're breaking down the shocking moment when Meryl Streep completely dismantled Joy Behar live on The View, leaving the entire studio in stunned silence. This is the kind of raw, unfiltered television that networks pray never happens, but when it does, it creates television history. Make sure you subscribe and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe how this unfolds. The morning started like any other at the View Studios. Meryl Streep had been booked for what the producers thought would be a straightforward promotional interview for her latest film. The Oscar winner, known for her grace and professionalism, settled into the guest chair as the cameras rolled and the theme music faded. Joy Behar, sitting in her usual spot, had that familiar smirk playing across her face. The one regular viewers know means she's preparing to stir the pot. "So, Meryl," Joy began, leaning forward with exaggerated interest, "tell us about this new movie of yours." I have to say, when I read the synopsis, I was wondering if Hollywood is just running out of original ideas these days. The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the rest of the panel exchanged quick glances. It was an unusually sharp opening even for Joy, who was known for her blunt commentary. Meryl, however, maintained her composure, offering a polite smile. "Well, Joy, I think storytelling has always involved revisiting themes that resonate with human experience," Meryl replied diplomatically. "This particular film explores the complexity of family dynamics during times of crisis, which feels quite relevant given everything families have been through recently." Joy waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, please, Meryl. Let's be honest here. You've made a career out of playing fearsome, tortured woman over and over again. The crying, the dramatic speeches, the whole suffering artist routine. Don't you think audiences are getting tired of watching you cry on screen for 2 hours?" The studio fell noticeably quiet. Even the production crew seemed to pause their usual bustling. Whoopi cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction Joy was taking the interview. Sarah looked down at her notes, suddenly finding them fascinating. Meryl's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in her eyes. "That's an interesting perspective, Joy. I'm curious. What would you consider authentic storytelling? Because from where I'm sitting, exploring human emotion and vulnerability seems like exactly what art should do." "Authentic?" Joy scoffed, her voice rising slightly. "Authentic would be admitting that you've been coasting on your reputation for decades. You get nominated for everything because it's Meryl Streep, not because the performances are actually fake remarkable anymore. It's like the emperor's new clothes, and everyone's too afraid to say it." The tension in the room was palpable now. Cameras continued to roll as the other host sat in stunned silence. This wasn't the playful back and forth that sometimes happened on the show. This felt personal, hostile, and completely unprofessional. Meryl set down the water glass she'd been holding and looked directly at Joy. "I see. So, you believe that recognition comes from some sort of industry conspiracy rather than craft and dedication?" Meryl's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath the politeness. "Tell me, Joy, what's your background in performance? What gives you the authority to make such sweeping judgments about artistic merit?" Joy's face flushed slightly. "I don't need to be a chef to know when food tastes bad, Meryl. And I've been in this business long enough to know manufactured excellence when I see it." "This business," Meryl repeated, her eyebrows raising slightly. "You mean television hosting?" "Because acting, real acting, requires a level of vulnerability and skill that I'm not sure you'd understand. It's not about delivering opinions from behind a desk." The other hosts were now actively trying to redirect the conversation. Whoopi jumped in. "Ladies, maybe we should talk about the film itself, the story, the characters," but Joy wasn't backing down. "Oh, here we go with the superiority complex. You think because you have a bunch of awards that you're untouchable? But let me tell you something, sweetheart. I've been calling out Hollywood phonies since before you were doing those ridiculous accents in every other movie." Meryl's composure finally cracked just slightly. "Phonies, that's rich coming from someone who's entire. Career is built on manufactured outrage and uninformed commentary. You want to talk about authentic? Let's discuss what's authentic about sitting here. Every day spouting opinions about subjects you clearly don't understand, while real artists are out there actually creating something meaningful. The words hung in the air like smoke. Joy's mouth opened and closed, for once seemingly at a loss for her usual quick comeback. The studio audience, which had been murmuring quietly, fell completely silent. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, unsure whether they should keep filming this career-ending moment or cut to commercial. Sarah tried desperately to smooth things over. I think what's wonderful about art is that it means different things to different people. And perhaps no, Meryl interrupted, her voice calm but firm. I think Joy has made her position quite clear. She believes that expertise, training, and decades of craft mean nothing compared to her personal opinions delivered from a position of comfort and safety. It's fascinating, really. This idea that criticism without understanding equals insight. Joy finally found her voice again, but it came out sharper and more defensive than her usual confrontation and tone. Don't you dare lecture me about understanding. I've been watching movies since before you were even thinking about acting. I know what I see, and what I see is someone who thinks she's above criticism. Meryl laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Joy, I've been criticized by some of the most brilliant minds in film and theater. The difference is those critics understood what they were evaluating. They could discuss technique, emotional truth, the relationship between text and performance. You're offering nothing but personal attacks disguised as professional commentary. The words hit Joy like a slap across the face. Her cheeks reened as she realized that Meryl had just publicly dismantled her entire approach to commentary in front of millions of viewers. But instead of backing down or acknowledging the valid point, Joy doubled down in the worst possible way: personal attacks. Joy's voice cracked slightly as she leaned forward aggressively. You want to talk about personal attacks? Let me tell you what's personal. Watching someone like you parade around Hollywood for 40 years, acting like you're doing Shakespeare when half the time you're just putting on funny voices and calling it acting. You think you're Katharine Hepburn, but honey, you're not even close. The studio was now completely silent except for the hum of the cameras. Whoopi had her hand pressed to her forehead, clearly regretting every decision that led to this moment. Sarah looked like she wanted to crawl under the desk. The producers in the control room were frantically trying to decide whether this was a disaster or the most compelling television they'd ever captured. Meryl sat back in her chair, and for a moment, everyone thought she might take the high road and simply end the interview. Instead, she folded her hands in her lap and spoke, with the kind of quiet intensity that made everyone lean forward to hear. Joy, I'm going to do something for you that clearly no one in your life has had the courage to do. I'm going to tell you the truth. Her voice was steady, but there was fire behind it. You have built a career on being deliberately inflammatory, because actual insight requires work, study, and intellectual honesty. You confuse volume with authority and controversy with relevance. Joy's mouth fell open. How dare you? I'm not finished, Meryl continued, her voice cutting through Joy's protest like a knife. You want to compare me to Katharine Hepburn? Fine. Hepburn was fearless, intelligent, and never punched down. She challenged power, not artists trying to do meaningful work. You, on the other hand, have made a living out of cheap shots and surface-level observations. The difference between us isn't just talent, Joy. It's character. The silence that followed was deafening. Joy's face had gone from red to pale, and for the first time in her career on The View, she seemed genuinely speechless. The other hosts were frozen, unsure whether to intervene or let this play out to its inevitable conclusion. Finally, Joy found her voice, but it came out as a strangled whisper. You think you can come on my show and humiliate me? Your show? Meryl's eyebrows shot up. Joy, this is The View. It belongs to all of you, and more importantly to the viewers who tune in expecting thoughtful discussion, not petty attacks on guests. But since you brought up humiliation, let me ask you this. When was the last time you created anything? When did you last put yourself out there vulnerable and exposed for people to judge? Joy's voice grew shrill. I create conversation, I create dialogue. I ask the tough questions that everyone else is afraid to ask. You create conflict. Meryl corrected firmly. There's a difference between tough questions and cheap attacks. A tough question about my work might be about my process, my choices, the themes I'm drawn to. Instead, you open with insults disguised as observations. That's not journalism, Joy. That's not even good entertainment.